September 12, 1997, around 12:20 a.m. Six men inside a U-Haul truck parked near Dunbar Armored, a cash handling company. They armed themselves with handguns and shotguns, covering their bodies with heavy black jackets and black ski masks. Everyone was focused on a man named Alan Pace, who did a last week debrief, and with a signal from him, the heist was on. These men are about to commit the biggest cash heist in America at the time, using smart tactics, without leaving any traces, except one piece of evidence that no one paid attention to. The FBI would monitor their actions for years, till one of the crew made a fatal mistake that brought the whole thing to a halt. They sneaked through the back door, which Pace already had keys for. Alan knew the place like the back of his hand. With military precision, the team took a very specific route and avoided every camera by taking turns sliding past in the intervals when it was changing directions, taking advantage of its blind spots. One false step and they would have risked being detected. After a few minutes, they entered the lunchroom and waited for another few minutes. Pace knew the workers' habits, and specifically, he knew the time of lunch break. When the guards and some of the workers entered the lunchroom, the robbers used the element of surprise to neutralize them, and they duct taped their feet and hands. They took the armed guards' weapons and forced them on the floor. While doing so, one of the women employees was injured. Pace kneeled near her and comforted her, advising her not to move and everything will be alright. After making sure no guards were in the building, Pace grabbed the vault room keys and went there with his team. But there was a big problem. The camera which was monitoring the room was fixed, meaning they could not avoid it. There was only one way to do this. They quickly rushed inside and pointed their guns to the money counters before any one of them could sound the alarm, threatening to shoot if anyone moved. The workers were neutralized, not able to push the alarm button, and now the robbers had total control of the entire facility. Pace opened the gates, and the driver brought the U-Haul truck inside the loading area. While doing that, he accidentally cracked a taillight, but everyone was focused on the cash, and no one noticed it. There was only one last obstacle: the vault door itself. How would they be able to open this 45cm thick steel door? They may get the keys from the employees, but what about the combination lock and other security measures? Pace simply walked straight in. He knew that between Friday and Saturday nights, the vault would be open, so the employees could move in big amounts of cash. He even avoided the small amounts, which belonged to small companies, because he wanted to strike fast and hard. They took the cash in bags, using a big movable trash bin, and moved it to the U-Haul truck. With $18.9 million of cash inside the truck, the six robbers had only one thing left to do: erasing all the traces that could lead investigators back to them. So, they took all the VCR and recordings from the security room. Then, they quickly got in the vehicle and made a clean getaway, making it the largest cash robbery in American history at the time. When the guards heard the robbers leaving, they quickly called the authorities, and an investigation started immediately. No fingerprints or DNA traces were ever found at the facilities. The only piece of evidence was a piece of a broken vehicle taillight. And some of the guards reported that one of the thieves' voices was similar to someone who worked at Dunbar, but couldn't get a grasp of who it was. The investigators couldn't find enough evidence, but they realized by examining the methods of the robbers and how they easily walked inside the facility and executed the heist that it was 100% an inside job. So they started digging into the records of current and prior Dunbar's employees. The name Alan Pace came up. Pace was laid off just one day before the heist, and the woman who injured her shoulder remembered that the man who tried to calm her had a voice similar to Pace's. Investigators did a thorough background check on him and regularly tracked his whereabouts. He was questioned several times, but it seemed that there was no evidence that could tie him to the heist. He even had a strong alibi. If Pace was gonna pull off this heist, he needed people he can control and trust. The first member of the crew was his best friend Eugene Hill, a longtime friend with whom Pace already worked as a security officer at other companies. He brought along 3 childhood friends, including Freddie McCrary Jr., Terry Brown, and Thomas Johnson. The gang spent days training on the timing with the cameras. Pace took note of every movement, the angle of rotation, the speed, and the latency between each 2 rotations, with a chronometer at his hand. He drilled his crew on the perfect timing and ways to pass through each camera. Pace was very meticulous in his methods and made sure no mistakes were made. Nothing would be left that can lead authorities to him or the gang. However, a sudden news turned his perfect plan upside down. On September 11th, the company management called Pace and fired him. At the moment, he had to give back his keys, but without them, the plan would fall apart. Pace had to act fast, so he decided that the heist was gonna happen the next day after he was fired. Everything was ready. The U-Haul truck was rented several weeks ago. The team trained enough to bypass security, and a party in Long Beach was to be held the following night to make the perfect alibi. But there was a problem. Pace realized he needed another man to work as a getaway driver, so he recruited Eric Boyd and explained the plan and his responsibilities. Then the gang went to the party. They took enough time to interact with people, talk, and have fun to guarantee their alibi. Around 11 p.m., each member started slipping out of the party and drove to the facility to commit the heist. After hauling the money on the truck, they headed back to Eugene Hill's apartment to stash the cash, weapons, and gear. Then they changed back and returned to the party like nothing happened. Pace was sure that no forensic evidence that could tie him to the heist would be found. He may be a potential suspect, but authorities will have nothing against him. He was right, because the investigation came to a grinding halt for several months. Despite the intensive police and FBI surveillance, they were sure if Pace was involved in a multi-million-dollar robbery, there would be signs of him upgrading to a lavish lifestyle, but he did nothing of that nature. He didn't spend much money and continued to live normally. Pace already knew that he would be closely monitored, so the first order he gave to the gang after the heist is to keep the money hidden for several months and launder it later through casinos in Las Vegas. The gang then started to launder their money using a company called Extreme Entertainment, a company that billed itself as an entertainment service that provided everything from children's games to exotic dancers. Two years passed without any problems. One day Eugene Hill wanted to buy real estate with cash, but he made a fatal mistake. He met with a broker and offered him a stack of cash, totaling $100,000. But what Eugene didn't know was that the man had previously worked for the company of Dunbar, and some of the cash was still bound together with the original branded currency straps. Suspicious, the broker kept the straps and went to the police. They were dated 2 days prior to the heist. It was then determined that the paper-type wrappers were actually from some of the money stolen from the company. The FBI, finally having a lead, didn't want to take action immediately out of fear of not being able to catch everyone involved in the heist, so for weeks they tailed Eugene Hill. A background check revealed that he had a connection with the prime suspect, Alan Pace. At one point during the investigation, the FBI was able to track records of various small companies, including Extreme Entertainment, which was the main one used to launder money. The accounting books looked suspicious for the investigators, as the business wasn't generating very much income, but there was a lot of cash going through it. Extreme Entertainment had two other people as partners, Terry Brown and Fred McCary. Investigators began to dig deeper into the financial backgrounds of all the partners. What they discovered was shocking. These four men were receiving huge amounts of money as payment from the company. The FBI also found out that Eugene Hill had a second source of income, another company called Rainforest, which dealt in new recycling technologies. They found out that the company wrote monthly checks to Eugene Hill and another man enlisted as a consultant for the company, called Thomas Johnson. Finally, the last piece of evidence needed was found: documents of a renter agreement for the U-Haul truck. They revealed that it was rented by Eugene Hill, and the truck's taillight matched the one found at the crime scene. With enough evidence for money laundering schemes and armed robbery, Hill was finally arrested. He soon confessed and named all the co-conspirators. Alan Pace initially claimed to be innocent, but he was arrested and sentenced to 24 years in prison on April 23, 2001. The other four pleaded guilty, receiving sentences between 8 and 10 years. Less than a third of the money was ever recovered, with $13.9 million still missing.